two different ways, whether it's through the calling on your phone or listening on your computer speakers. You will be able to do that either way. Feel free at any time if you haven't made it onto the audio, just go ahead and pop on the audio. There will be a question and answer period at the end of the session. Rosalinda will be relaying the questions to me, as I do not have the question panel like you guys do, because I am a presenter, but since she is the organizer, she will be able to do that. So just a little bit about us, and then we'll talk about what the agenda will be. Some of you know us directly. Some of you have just gotten some emails and know a little bit about us, but CDT is a value-added reseller for PTC, and for those that aren't familiar with the value-added reseller, think of us as PTC Ford, and we are the Ford dealership. So just about all of PTC solutions that you can see here, we provide services for, whether it's sales or education, implementing or consulting or whatever it may be. We have the capabilities for. We have a very competent staff when it comes to migration and integration services, and again, whether that's for just Pro-E in general or Creo Parametric or Windchill, we have those capabilities. We do provide support also. I do take technical calls just like our other AEs that are on staff. As everybody knows, their direct support lines are through PTC, but whenever we have open time and can help any of our customers, we are glad to do that. Our training centers that we have, all of our training centers are actually PTC certified trainers, so in most cases we are the only game in town. We have one in Kansas City, Arlington, Texas, which essentially is Dallas, and then also St. Louis. One thing that's very unique about CDT, and as a company, we take pride in the fact of accommodating most educational needs whenever we can. So if there isn't a class that you see on a schedule, we will gladly add a class for you. And then we are one of the very few VARs, if not the only VAR, that will run classes with one person. It allows us to create good relationships with our customers and companies that we deal with. And we feel all of our AEs and educators are very competent, so we do a good job at that. Okay? Obviously, you can go to cdtplm.com for training, whether it's for training or any other our needs, whether it's the emails that you have that you get in Rosalinda or Marco, that is our sales guy here out of Dallas, is where I'm at. Any of those needs we can make for you. And I guess I did forget to mention that's me up at the top there. I am out of the Ben Givhan. I am out of the Dallas metro area. So I am the applications manager, which is just a fancy title for the for CDT. Okay. So agenda. We are going to cover a new module that was released when PTC released the Creo Parametric, or essentially the Creo product family, which is called the Flexible Modeling Package. It is a sort of a little sister or a package, or they've taken certain aspects out of the direct modeling package, what used to be Co-Create, which is now is Creo Direct, and put it into the Creo Parametric, or for those of you that aren't familiar with all the terms, essentially the Pro-E interface, and we'll talk about that as we go along. You can see some of the things that we'll talk about. Why would you use it? And we'll see a live demonstration of what it can do for you. Have a little summary of what the concepts that we covered. There is at this point in time a special offer as far as pricing. It's pricing or maintenance, and Rosalinda can expand on that a little bit later on. And then towards the end, any questions that you have. So again, you can type a question as we go along, but for the purposes of time and flow of the demonstration, we'll answer those towards the end. Okay, so for those of you, just so you know, and we'll talk a little bit about this as we go along, but the concept of parametric versus direct, essentially PTC a few years ago purchased what is called a direct modeler. And for those of you that are not familiar with what exactly a direct modeler, there's a number of different packages that are out on the market today that are considered to be direct modeler. And essentially what direct modeling is geometry-based design and manipulation with no regard of history and or relationship or parametric building when you're creating your geometry. So, you create sketches and you create blocks and you create holes, but once I start to move and drag those things around, I'm manipulating geometry directly and not necessarily nearly as worried about the relationships that I have built. And again, whether it's in the part mode or assembly mode, it's the same concept. Essentially, in most direct modelers, there is no separation between what a part or an assembly is. Essentially, you just create bodies of geometry and describe them as parts, and then you can assemble them and move them around. And again, you're not worried nearly as much about what the parametrics or the relationships that you build from one to the next is. And I know that's kind of a quick and dirty explanation, and for the purposes of time, we can't get into this too much. But if any of you are more interested about what a direct modeling system is, you can always YouTube and see what is now Creo Direct, which used to be called, when PTC purchased it, what was called Co-Create. Okay, so PTC purchased Co-Create and then rebranded it with all the rebranding of all their products into Creo Direct. Okay, so Creo Parametric is Pro-E, and Creo Direct is the Co-Create package. And again, for those of you all on here, you should be fairly familiar with what Pro-E is capable of and why you're doing it. And just because we talk about Direct and you see some of these ideas over here, doesn't mean that the Creo Direct package isn't fully capable of doing all the work that you need. It was actually born out of HP. HP, what you would assume was HP. All of HP printers are designed with what was the Co-Create and now is the Creo Direct package. Again, it's an entirely separate design package and it has a lot of different capabilities, and there are specific niches why you would use one or the next. Okay. Again, direct modeling process opportunities. Really, the idea here is that even though I can do a lot of the same work that I would do within Pro-E, the idea is I do engineering, hardcore engineering work in Pro-E, and I do design work with the Creo Direct application, but I also can make late design changes because, again, you're not worried about moving things and what happens down the line. Not that you can't make those relationships, but you're usually not nearly as tied into those relationships. On-the-fly design changes, in the late-stage design changes, the ability to model preparation and your FEA work, and you'll see some of those ideas as I get into the demo. The demo as we go along today, but a lot of different reasons. And again, we'll have probably some Creo Direct demos and webcasts as we go on, but unfortunately, Dave, we won't get in too deep about exactly what the capabilities are. Okay, so Creo Flexible Modeling. Again, this is a Creo Parametric only app, so if you're using Wildfire 5 and back, and you know what, Rosalinda, and I forgot, you should have piped up here. We forgot to ask our questions here, but we'll do that towards the end. Just remind me, okay? I'm sorry about that. That Creo, the Flexible Modeling Extension is a Creo Parametric app only, so if you're using Wildfire 4 or 3 or 2, you could not use this application. You'd have to upgrade to Creo Parametric. And essentially what they've done is taking a number of different concepts and ideas and commands and taking them out of the Creo Direct package and made them available within the Creo Parametric or Pro-E, what would be called Pro-E package, so you can use some of those abilities. And really what we're talking about here is the ability to manipulate geometry in only a geometry concept where I'm not worried about what happens in the parametrics, even though when I move things, parametrics still can be maintained. For instance, if I can come over here and without care of any of the counter bores or rounds that go along with it, I can select all of these surfaces in this little illustration right here, move all of those objects over, not care really about what the parametrics are, but if I was in an assembly, anything that was connected onto this hole would move right along with it. So all of these moves and manipulations are actually recorded as features within your model tree, and even though you're doing just geometry direct type edits, what you have here is still parametrics that tie along to it, and it makes it really interesting of some of the things that you can do. So whether we are talking about manipulating Pro-E data in a direct sense, or, and this is where it gets kind of nice, whether you are manipulating import data. Because again, we all should know here on the call that manipulating import data for the most part is not really possible in any efficiency type sense, but with the flexible modeling extension allows you to manipulate geometry of also step or IGEST or whatever other types of forms you can put in into Pro-E and actually manipulate that geometry and move holes and move chamfers and edges and walls and all that other good stuff is what you will see here in the demo itself. Okay, so the idea of accelerated detail design and down the road changes, and hopefully you guys have a kind of a little bit of a sense after the description I just gave you of what it may be, and hopefully you'll have a little bit more of one once I get into the demo. Okay. So actually, Rosalinda, I'm very sorry. I should have stopped and just scream at me. Will you actually create those poll questions right now, and we can do that right now instead of waiting to the end? Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. So for those of you on the call, Rosalinda's going to put up 2 poll questions. Will you please promptly answer those questions, and then we can move on from there. So go ahead and answer those, and we'll move on. Rosalinda, let me know when you're done with the first one, and you can go ahead and announce, or I can announce to move on to the second one.
I have one more. Okay, we're ready to move on.
Okay. You want to give us a quick summary of those questions, please?
It looks like about 55% of people attending today are using 4.0. We've got about 18% using Creo Parametric 1.0. And it looks like 27% are using Creo Elements Pro, formerly Wildfire 5.0.
And then for the other question?
It looks like a majority of attendees are using files and folders to manage their data.
Aha. Okay.
Yes, we have 10% using Windchill 10, and about 20% of our attendees are using Windchill 9.1. And 10% are using a version of Interlink.
Okay. All right. So it looks like we have a good broad spectrum of versions, whether it's Pro-E or whether it's data management system. That's always good because you tend to get some good stuff out of it when you're on a little bit later version, see some of the new stuff that are out. Okay. All right. So without further ado, we'll kind of get to the goods of why everybody's on here, and we'll go through some demos. You'll actually see the little hand thing that we have right here. It's not the same colors, but I have a variation of that, and then we'll see some of the geometry type changes that we have made. Okay. All right. So all I'm going to do here is I've just fired up Creo Parametric. For those of you that have not seen Creo Parametric before, and this is your first introduction to it, you'll have a little crash course into what you are seeing. But essentially, this is the changes that they have made for what would be considered Wildfire, which is now Creo Parametric. You can kind of see this is just the beginning interface as I fire up Creo Parametric. See what is now called the ribbon interface. Me personally, I think it's kind of nice for those of you that are working on Wildfire 5 and have been introduced to it in the drawing mode. They have made some changes that allow you to manipulate and create things no matter what tabs you're in, which is nice, and that's kind of a big cheer usually from the Wildfire 5 guys. But now, here's the new ribbon interface, okay? For those of you that are considering moving up in some form. We all know what happened when we moved from 2001 to the wildfire series. I will promise you it's not nearly as a big a jump as what that was. You can kind of see some of the interface as I open up a part here. This is just a part file that has been opened up. One thing that's nice that they've added into the interface that makes it a little bit easier as far as a transition is this little command right here. So essentially what they've done, for those of you that haven't seen this before, is they've logically grouped commands into tabs. So you can see all of the geometry and modeling-based functions here in what is called the Model tab. The Analysis tab, you can see distance and angle measurements. And if we were in assembly, you would see some of the interference checking type functions. But one thing that's nice here is that if I'm in this tab specifically, I have this something called command search. And what I can do is command, and I can search for something. And what I would do is I'm just going to type in extrude. And what happens is if I actually take my mouse and highlight and go over the extrude, it actually takes me to the appropriate tab and then also highlights that extrude command. So for those of you that are a little bit leery as far as what happened to all my tools, it's not nearly as big of a jump, and they've added some things into the interface that makes it a little bit easier for you to deal with when you can just type in the command that you want. And I can actually launch this command from here. But it doesn't make a difference what tab you're in. You can find commands fairly easily in the command search concept. Okay, all of these tabs are customizable. You can take commands out. You can add tabs in. You can add tabs in. You can create the bend tab and take all these other tabs and only put the commands that you want within the interface. But a lot of different things that they have made so the user interface a little bit more user friendly than what they have been in the past. And to be honest with you, I kind of like it. So, but that's what I'm supposed to say. So anyway, so what we are working on here is a Pro E model. Okay, a Pro E model. There it is. You see features that would exist in any other Pro E model. And then what we're also going to do here is I'm going to open up an import file. So I'm going to open up an import file. Let's do it here. File open. I should have this. All files. I had it open just a little bit ago. File open. I will get this open here in just a second, guys. All files. Step file. What happened to my step file? Let me look for it just a second, guys. I just had this open. Sorry about this. Maybe I accidentally deleted that. I want to make sure you guys see this, so I will, there it is. We want to copy that guy. I think I might have accidentally deleted that. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'll go ahead and we will also open up this move step file. Okay, and what you're going to see is we're going to actually open up import geometry. All right, now it's not the most complicated import geometry that you have, but it is true import geometry. And what you will see here is the flexible modeling package is a tab that gets added into the interface of what is Creo Parametric. Okay, and then we'll talk about here the capabilities of it. So what I have here are two different models, and the two different models are this model right here, and then this move model that you see right here. And then we'll kind of start out with this, the Pro E, which has the history, and then we'll kind of move from there. But one thing I want to talk about here is when you talk about moving geometry in a sense of manipulating and just dragging and pushing and saying I want to move it this far, 5 or 6 inches, or whatever it may be, a lot of times what you're dealing with is how do you select that geometry, okay? So when I pick the flexible modeling tab, you see a number of different commands that it has, and a lot of them are based off of selection. So those of you that have done geometry selection, and as far as the surface base, where you use the loop selection technique and the seed and surface selection technique, the selection techniques and the flexible modeling are actually quite intelligent. So I can pick a surface and say, hey, I want to move this surface, or I can say, I want to describe this thing as a boss. And what you'll see is all of the surfaces that are associated with what is considered to be that boss will get selected. Same thing if I pick this surface right here. Right? If I pick this surface right here, if I say I want the entire boss, notice how some of these other surfaces didn't get selected. But if I say I want this surface and I say want boss with all the secondary features or secondary surfaces, it selects the entire thing. And whether it's bosses, what it considers to be bosses, or if I have what it considers to be cut, I have the ability to select not only those surfaces, but also a number of different surfaces with this secondary concept. So it makes it easy for you when you're going in with the idea that I want to manipulate geometry and not just holding the control button and picking everywhere, or using some of the other techniques that Pro E has, where you can use some of the techniques within the flexible modeling package to get the same same process done. And it doesn't make a difference whether we're using a Pro E based part or I'm using a import geometry based part. I still have the boss with secondary concepts, and again, it makes it easier for me to select and take some time off my hands from using the control button and some of the other functions that I have. Okay, so selection is nice and easy within the software. It makes it easy for you, again, to move some of these things around instead of just picking time that you might usually see. Okay? All right, manipulating geometry. Again, whether it's on the import idea or whether it is on the Pro E idea, and we'll do it on both, what I have is something called the move command, and the move command is sectioned out into move by dimensions and move by constraints and move using the dragging technique, and I'll show all of these. But if I say move using the dragging technique, what you'll see is the 3D dragger, which is prominent actually in Creo Parametric in the assembly mode, and what I'm allowed to do is drag geometry, and all I'm doing is dragging it along, essentially, in this case, X, Y, and Z. So I can drag it up. Notice how when I drag this guy up, the actual geometry manipulates to keep the solid concept and changes itself to adapt to what we're doing. So we'll drag it back down. There it is. Okay, when I'm done, let's go ahead and drag it back up a little bit there. When I'm done, I say here's the OK button. And what I've done is actually drag import geometry. Again, import geometry around manipulating that geometry. If I come do it here in the Pro E parts, it's the same concept. If I come in and pick this surface and say I want the boss with everything secondary, do a move right here, again, what I'm doing is actually manipulating Pro E data, but in the sense of a geometry manipulation. So again, the idea here, everyone, is that if I have this set of features right here, and at the last minute, my customer comes up and says, hey, Ben, we want to move this thing 10 inches one way, but for whatever reason, I've built a lot of parametrics and relationships into that, and the effects of that could be fairly devastating on what my model and manipulation of my model may be. What I can do with the flexible modeling packages is not only do this with import geometry, but I can perform these same functions on Pro E data as well. And it was what you see here is at the bottom of this, if I drag this down, what they go in as move type features. Okay, so I can come here and pick this move, and if I delete this move feature, whatever I just did goes away. Okay, so whether I'm doing moves on features like this, or whether I'm doing something called move by dimensions, and I'll say instead of just a 3D dragger, I'll pick this guy right here. Actually, let's go select him first. Let's select everything first. Let's say move with secondary, move by dimension. I'm going to say from here to here is how when I want to regulate my dimension. And now what I can do is say, instead of me just manually just dragging things around and not knowing where the dimensions are going to be, I can say here, that's how I want to regulate, how I'm going to measure it. I want to move it from that. I want the dimension to be close to 100 or whatever it may be. And now I have a little bit better of a sense of exactly where that part may be. So whether I'm moving one direction, you can move a second direction if you want to. You can move in 2 different directions if you'd like. And again, something that's kind of nice, and I think it's kind of slick, is that if you come over here, and the other type of move that you have is the move with constraints. Now, the idea here with this, and you know what, let's back up so everybody understands what I'm trying to do here, is that I can say move with dragger, and I'm going to drag this guy over, right, somewhere over here. And then I'm going to kind of turn them around, right, turn them this way. But really what I have here is no sense of where this thing is at, right? No idea of where this at, right? There's no dimensions that kind of regulate this. Even though I place it now, I can kind of drag it back, but it's kind of off as far as angle-wise. You know, I've manipulated it onto an entirely different surface, but again, there's no real regulation behind it. What I can do here is actually move this thing by something that's called constraints. And it sounds fairly familiar to assembly because that's really what it is. So what I'm going to say here is, and this is, there's no flat surface here. I would pick this if this was a flat surface, but I want this, oops, wrong one, not that one. I want this flat surface right here, and that flat surface right there will make it into a distance. There it is, okay? So from here now, what I can do is regulate distance and how far or how far that guy's sticking out. I'll say I now want to regulate it from that surface to that surface right there. I can now regulate it this way and kind of drag it back and forth, and you can see how we're measuring this way. And in the last one, I want to measure from here, and I want that measurement to be based off of the bottom. There it is, and I want it to be a distance measurement, and now I can also regulate it off the bottom. So again, now what I'm doing is manipulating it as a distance like that, a distance right here, in and out this way, and then also a distance right there. So again, even though we are dragging and manipulating geometry, again, whether it's the ProE sense or in the sense of an IGES data, I can regulate placement of where that object may be at. And again, I'm not really worried about what the parametrics are at any given time. All right, some other things that you can do, whether it's features or actually walls, okay? I can come in and say, here's the surface that I want to move. I drag it out. Notice how the geometry manipulates accordingly, right? It's not just dragging out straight from here. It actually manipulates accordingly. It's very nice. You can see that type of move right here. Leave that guy right there. I can come back into the geometry selections. Notice how I can come in and pick this wall right here. If I do a direct move with the modeler, notice how I actually expand that thickness. Well, that's not really what we want. We actually want to move the entire wall. I can select that wall and that wall also, and then do a move from that point. Notice how I can say, actually, I want the 3D dragger to move along that edge. I move the wall out now, and I've actually manipulated where that wall is by moving those. Again, I could select all of these features right along with it and move those features right along with it if I wanted to. Let's do an undo and see that move that real quick. There's that surface. Let me go ahead and hold the control button and say boss with secondary. Do a move. Move the 3D dragger right there. Notice how everything stays right in relationship to that wall manipulation also. Okay, and again, whether it's cuts that I'm moving, whether it's walls that I'm moving, still have all those same capabilities. Come in here and pick the hole that I have, or essentially the cut in this manner. I can do a direct move if I wanted to. I also can say offset, and I can manipulate the size of this hole. Okay, manipulating the size of the hole. We want that hole to be that size. Again, I'm manipulating direct ProE geometry, or if I come back into the move part, in manipulating geometry, import geometry. Notice how the rounds adapt right along with it. Okay, the rounds adapt right along with it. And again, I've made a quick change in IGES data if a customer would ask me to. Okay? So there are a lot of the move type functions that are in the software. A lot of different variations that you have the ability to do with it. Some of the other things that you can do here, and we'll go through some of these other guys. One of them is the edit of rounds. It will recognize, again, we are on the import data. Notice how I can select a round and say, hey, I just want this round. Or if I say I want this round and I want round with secondary, I can do an edit round. Notice how I can manipulate all of those rounds at once. And then, again, what are we manipulating? We're actually manipulating import geometry. I also have the ability to take these rounds and then do a remove command. So again, if you're doing FEA work on import type geometry, it's a good way to modify that geometry. Again, I can pick these guys, round secondary, and do a remove also. taking out all the rounds on import data, and this is very similar to the remove tool that you see within Pro E. So again, whether it's here or whether it's on the geometry tools, doesn't make a difference. Still do the exact same type of function. There it is, round with secondary, and then I can edit the round if I want to. Again, editing the round of Pro E data, and what do you see here at the bottom of the model tree? An edit of the round. All right, so the remove command, the edit round command, there's one more thing that I'd like to show you, the substitute here. I'll open up a little different file for that. Here's my substitute function. For those of you that have ever used the offset and replace command in the surfacing tool, this is kind of an extension of that. This is actually a little bit slicker than what that one is. But what I can do is say substitute, and I want to substitute that surface, and what I want to substitute it with is that surface. And what's really nice about this is the ability for the software to keep the rounds, and not only the rounds, but also the holes and the geometry that was associated with those holes, or in sense, what I'm talking about here is the rounds that are on those holes. So if you wanted to create another wavy type surface just to see what it would look like or do a quick prototype, again, this is Pro E geometry that I'm manipulating and do a substitute with. That replace command is within the Pro E interface if you've never used it, but this one's a little bit nicer and it does a little bit more work for you, where I wouldn't have to recreate all the rounds on the holes, where you see all of this work has been done for you, and I've replaced that surface right here with this surface right here as soon as it regenerates with that object. Okay, so kind of a nice feature that we have with that. All right, last thing that I wanted to show you of this, again, very simple interface, very simple commands that it has, is that I'm going to go ahead and let's close a few of these guys down here. Let's go ahead and open up this little robotic hand that I have. Just turn off the bird's nests. There we are. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and open up this little finger that we have. Okay, for that guy. Notice how this is a Pro E part that I have right here. Let's go ahead and go back to the assembly. And what I'm going to do is assemble a little pin into that finger hole that we have. So as soon as I find it here, there it is, finger pin. Let's go ahead and drag it into an area right about there. Let's go ahead and turn the 3D dragger off, and I'm going to go ahead and place in this hole. Okay. So notice how all we did was just put a pin in the little finger hole. But what I'm going to do is come back to that specific part, and what I'm going to do is in the flexible modeling function, go ahead and pick that hole and do a move for it. Okay. And we'll do it with the dragger. And what I'm going to do here is just drag that hole that way. Okay, there it is. We notice it's a little offset, and all it does is put a feature in the model tree. That is that move, excuse me, command. If I come back in to my assembly, there it is. Now if I do a Control G and a regenerate, notice how it does keep the parametrics of where that placement is for that pin. So again, what I can do is manipulate Pro E geometry without all of the implications of all of the parameters or all of the relationships that I have built, but still keep, in a sense, some of those relationships, whether it's part mode or whether it's assembly mode, that I still get the results that I want for the manipulation of that geometry. Okay? So for the time constraint idea, that's a brief overview of what the flexible modeling capabilities are for Creo Parametric and obviously flexible modeling. Okay. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and throw back open our PowerPoint that we have right here, okay, and talk about a little bit about what it is here. Essentially, you can get the flexible modeling extension at about $1,500. It is a floating module, just like all of the other Pro E modules are. You can float it from one seat to the next. It's free maintenance for the first year, so you don't pay maintenance for that. So essentially, and Rosalinda, correct me if I'm wrong, excuse me, that all it would be is the first year would be $1,500 out of pocket, and that is the offer that they have right now. Okay.
You're correct, Ben.
I'll leave this open right here. What'd you say?
I said you would be correct. It's $1,500, yes. And I don't see any questions just yet. Ben, it doesn't look like we have any questions in the queue. If anyone should have any questions later, feel free to either call or email myself or Ben at the email address and numbers that are listed on the screen. And if there are no more questions, well, if there are no questions, then we hope to see you at our next presentation in a couple of weeks. We'll be going over Intro to Creo Parametric then. Do you have anything else, Ben? If there are no questions, that'll conclude today's webinar, and we hope to see you at our future webinars. I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.